Welcome to Todd Talks, a small segment of our Plywood Palace Garage YouTube channel. I'm your host, Todd Touchberry, and today we're stepping back to a time when roads were dirt, speed was measured in courage, and the automobile was still a mechanical marvel. At the heart of it all, the car that put the world on wheels, the Ford Model T. But we won't stop there. We'll also look at other pre-war classics and talk to the people who keep them alive.
So grab your driving goggles, advance the spark, and let's take a ride into the golden age of motoring.
All right, can everyone hear?
Are y'all ready?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hi.
We're ready.
Hi. So this is Jennifer. I am Todd's wife. I am taking over the show tonight. Todd has lost his voice today, so I know this is Todd Talks, but Todd is not talking. I think he gave too much unsolicited Model T advice and stories today at the restaurant. So we're going to be taking over the show for him today. So we have a little bit of with Sliver Channel, and we have Heath with Mountaineer Motor Company joining us tonight. And Todd, you want to say something, or can you say something?
Yeah, I have a little bit of voice.
We can't hear you at all.
This is a real opportunity for us. We get to talk, and he can't answer back. It's great.
It really is. Well, Heath, I do want to go ahead and get started with you.
Sure.
Tonight, so I'll let you kind of take over for right now.
Absolutely. Well, it's funny. Todd and I, this came up last year. We were talking about all the different times we visited the Biltmore estate and why are there no antique cars out there or information about George Vanderbilt's cars. And it's something I had been kind of looking into. Years ago, there was an antique car on display that was a 1913 Stevens-Duryea touring car that had been in the winery, and it disappeared. And we're like, what happened? And so I ended up doing some research with other historians in Asheville and came across a ledger of vehicles that had been sold to George Vanderbilt through some friends of mine that are related to a person named Eugene Sawyer, who brought the first car to Asheville in 1901. And he was subsequently our first car dealer. And his family still had his sales ledger from the late 1800s until 1919. And it detailed multiple vehicles being sold. So Todd's going to show, this is a picture of George Washington Vanderbilt, who came to Asheville in the late 1880s. And he was here with his mother, Mary Louisa, for treatment for her chronic bronchitis, which is somewhat believed to perhaps have been tuberculosis. And they were seeing a famous respiratory doctor named Samuel Westray Battle. And it was while they were visiting the city. This is where everybody was prescribed to go to with respiratory and lung ailments as well as tuberculosis. And it was while she was in treatment with Dr. Battle that George was out acquiring property in Asheville and the surrounding area and fell in love with it. And he would come to build this incredible house after acquiring about 125,000 acres around here. And this house was called Biltmore. Now, just to back up a little bit, we want to talk about how did this guy get his money? Well, his father was a guy named William Vanderbilt, who was the son of Cornelius Vanderbilt, the founder of many railway and shipping lines stemming from New York. And Cornelius, George's grandfather, had accumulated a fortune of $100 million with these rail lines and shipping via what would now be the Staten Island Ferry. George's father, William, doubled that fortune to 200 million. And so all of that money trickled down to these many different Vanderbilt children. And George never actually worked. He spent most of his time traveling and acquiring art and several different residences. But different than his siblings who had homes in New York on Fifth Avenue and summer homes in Newport, Rhode Island, and even Washington, D.C., he stood out and chose this small, isolated mountain town that had only been accessed by the railway lines about 10 years prior to him coming to the city. So he built what amounted to, he had a property acquired of 125,000 acres And then he built a house that is called the Biltmore House, and it is 135,000 square feet with 250 rooms, 35 bedrooms, and 43 bathrooms, as well as 66 fireplaces. And it looks like a big, beautiful castle. Was designed by Richard Morris Hunt, the famous Beaux-Arts architect who did a lot of architecture during the Gilded Age. And one of the unique things was the landscaping was done by a famous landscape architect named Frederick Law Olmsted. Now, this would be one of the first areas that had paved roads. So there's 4 miles of road that lead up to this 135,000 square foot house. And they were paved with a crushed stone paving technique called McAdam. And so this would have been probably the first paved roads in Buncombe County. And this was something that really impressed people all along. So this is a little bit just to give you the origin story of how everything came together.
Right.
Now, Todd, if we want to go ahead and flip over to the next slide. So the Biltmore House, it took 5 years to build. It was 1891 to 1895 because it was so massive and required so many craftsmen. And this is when we start to see the advent of the internal combustion engine coming to the fore. And so it would be several years later that George would get his first ride in an automobile. He was initially kind of against them. He didn't want any of them on the estate. And it wasn't until he took a road trip through France in 1906 in a Panhard Lavoisier, I don't know how to pronounce it exactly correctly, but that he became really impressed with automobiles. And starting around 1909, he would buy his first automobile.
It was a good time to tour in France in the automobile. They were way ahead of the rest of the world in those early days. The early French cars were the leaders in technology.
Absolutely. Well, and many of the other Vanderbilts. So George had a brother that was named Willie K. Vanderbilt, and he started what was known as the Vanderbilt Cup, which was a race on Long Island that was really the first organized race of manufacturers that involved not only domestic U.S. made automobiles, but foreign automobiles. And it involved, I believe, 18 competitors. This was a 30-mile race down basically a dirt road racing the length of Long Island. And Willie K was really very much an automobile enthusiast as well as a competitive sailor. So it's in the bloodline that they enjoyed these incredible automobiles at that time. Now, for George to be able to get cars, I mean, he had some foreign vehicles, but when he came to Asheville, he needed to have a go-to person here that could provide vehicles. And so he connected with the city, one of the city's first auto merchants, which was a guy named Eugene Sawyer. He brought the first automobile to Asheville in 1901, which is a steam-powered locomobile. So these are a couple pictures. This is Willie K. running the Vanderbilt Cup race in his Renault, and we saw the Biltmore House, that big castle-looking building. So just to give a little bit of context of what kind of automobiles there were at that time.
Heath, you just like I said, they might not be in the right order that we were originally discussing, but just tell me when to go back or forward or anything.
Sure. No, you're right on it. This is Eugene Sawyer as a young man who started as a bicycle merchant, and he ended up building his own automobile out of bicycle parts in a 17 horsepower Brennan internal combustion engine. And then he would be the person that would sell some of these vehicles to George Vanderbilt. And he started with a couple of different brands. So he started with Cadillac with their single cylinder internal combustion engines. And then he later began selling Maxwell, a company that was called EMF, that was Everett, Metzger, and Flanders of Detroit. And then he started selling Chalmers Detroit, which was a fairly big brand in Buick. And these were some brands that intrigued George Vanderbilt. He was trying to find something that would be pretty practical, but could also get service locally. And so he started looking around at some of those brands. And his estate superintendent was a guy named Chauncey Beadle, who is known for cultivating all the plantings. He worked with Olmsted to furnish the estate with all these plants. but he later became the estate superintendent. And so most of the correspondence, as far as dealing with the vehicles George was buying, was between Eugene Sawyer and Chauncey Beadle. So they were working out things like the options that George was selecting for his cars. There's even some correspondence on the first vehicle, which was a 1909 Chalmers Detroit Model 7 that was said to be red and blue two-tone. And they were trying to decide if he was going to add on a windshield, which was a $150 addition. But just, you kind of think of unlimited wealth, and yet there was some pullback on some of the options that he wanted to add on this car. But that ended up being the first car he bought, was a Chalmers Detroit Model 7. And then he would go on to some other vehicles. Now, Eugene was also selling bicycles to the estate as well. So he sold very high quality aluminum rim bicycles when they were kind of moving out of fixed wheel bikes. And this was a model called the Eagle bicycle. And this would have been used by workers on the estate as well as people doing security. So Eugene was not only selling vehicles to George for personal use, but they also were selling trucks for the farm there as well as bicycles. So I think we can go on to the next one. This is just an early ad. So this is Eugene's dealer was called the Asheville Cycle and Automobile Company. And that would later be truncated to just the Asheville Automobile Company. And then it would later change to Sawyer Motor Company. So he was very big into Chalmers Detroit, and later would get pretty heavily into Stevens-duryea as some of these early brands. And you've got to keep in mind, there were about 2,600 domestic automakers in this early period of like 1900 to 1920. So we're going to cover a lot of ground.
How were and again, if you're just joining, I don't have much of a voice. How were the roads in Asheville at this particular time, whenever these higher end cars started coming into town?
So the roads are really not that good. So we had pretty rough, rutted dirt roads. And when it would rain, we would have this terrible mud that would bog a lot of vehicles down. And we didn't have a lot of vehicles that were registered in Asheville. At the time, we had a pretty robust electric streetcar system. But the way the roads were, it wasn't even really that easy to get around on a bicycle or like on a horse or carriage. So one of the things that George would get involved in pretty early on, now you've got to keep in mind, he buys his first car in 1909, but we begin to see vehicles really pick up as far as people adopting them and then becoming more affordable around 1913. And that's when things start really taking off. And that is George, he gets involved with a statewide program that's called the Buncombe County Good Roads Association. And that is a group of people that are embracing this new automotive technology, but they're also saying we need to grade a lot of the street areas to make the inclines less severe, and we need to pave the road so that it's easier to get around. So we'll probably get to that maybe a little bit later in our discussion of kind of the nuts and bolts of the price tag associated with that. But this is a great picture that Todd has pulled up. This is Eugene Sawyer's dealership that was on South Lexington. He had one his first dealer was on Church Street, if you're familiar with downtown Asheville. And then this was on South Lexington, where this was the Asheville Cycle and Automobile Company, where these cars would have been rolling out of the showroom that George would have been buying between 1909 and 1914. Now, we'll kind of touch on this. George died in 1914, so his time with the automobile was relatively short. He died from complications due to an appendectomy. But so he started in 1909, so it was a very dense, he packed a lot in those 5 years with the automobile. So Eugene sold him 5 different vehicles. He was trading like every year. So he started with a 1909 Chalmers Detroit Model 7, had a 1910 Chalmers Model 40, which is like a big touring car. Oh, I forgot to mention, that's a great picture right there. This is the Sawyer Motor Building that was Eugene Sawyer's last dealership that is on a street called Cox Avenue in downtown Asheville. It's kind of the brewery district now. So this is a newer building that was built in 1924 after he moved out of the South Lexington location in that previous photo.
You can tell I took time editing this with the capital O in motor.
Avant-garde.
Yeah, I think that's a great picture.
This is done by a friend of mine whose name is Tim Birchfield. That's a really great drone pilot here at a company called Line of Sight Technologies. And we do like a lot of architectural drone stuff together. But yeah, we'll go into I think we've got some pictures of some of those cars we were calling out. This is actually an old Chalmers radiator badge that I saw at a museum I was at this summer. It was called the Swigert Museum in Huntington, Pennsylvania, and they had this whole board just filled with all these badges. And you very rarely see Chalmers because the company really didn't exist for that long. So it's pretty neat to see like this old porcelain badge from that car. But yeah, so that first car we've got a picture of, this is kind of an early example of this is not exactly what George's looked like, but this is a 1909 Chalmers. So you can see it has a lot of brass accessories. Todd and I, we were kind of discussing, we're like, this is kind of brass era, but it's also kind of Edwardian cars. So when you think about stuff that is Edwardian era, we would refer to as pre-World War I. So kind of early 1906 to 1914.
So, did he get a chauffeur at this time, or was he driving himself?
So it was a little bit of both. So George and Edith both drove themselves. Edith is George's wife, for those that are not as familiar with Biltmore history. But he also had a chauffeur. So Eugene helped him hire a chauffeur who was a local person named Raymond Plemons, who was a native of Leicester, North Carolina, which is a little suburb of Asheville, was kind of its own town. And Raymond was a very skilled mechanic. So he was the head mechanic and chauffeur for Biltmore for 12 years. So he started in 1909. And in addition to maintaining a lot of the vehicles and being George's driver when he was in town, he was also a very competitive Harley Davidson and Indian motorcycle racer. And he was racing in hill climb events. So Asheville, a lot of people don't know. Todd and I, we've talked a little bit about, there were 4 different NASCAR tracks in Asheville from 1949 to 1999, but we also had racing as early as 1912. So we were doing kind of long distance races like the Vanderbilt Cup from like Hendersonville to Asheville on these dirt roads, and we were also doing hill climb competitions to see how fast these touring cars could get up some of our steep inclines. And so Raymond was very competitive in the motorcycle hill climbs that took place close to downtown. So these would be on Hillside Street or South French Broad Avenue here in Asheville. And the only reason I've found this is just looking through a bunch of old newspaper articles about this stuff, because it's just really not anything that people kind of captured. So it's something I'm still chipping away at. But Raymond, he would end up doing a lot of really cool things in motorsport. Like he flew airplanes. And then later on, he borrowed Edith's Cadillac. Now, his job was when the Vanderbilts would come into Washington, D.C., was to drive to Washington, D.C. This is in like the teens, and pick them up and drive them back to Biltmore. And so you're talking about a several days journey at that time with speed limits and not great road conditions. And this, after George's death, he borrowed, Edith had a 1920 Cadillac with the flathead V8 in it, and he drove it up there. He said he made it in 23 and a half hours from Asheville to Washington, D.C. And I don't know if that's an official record, but he, in the newspaper, said it was a record. So it's kind of self-proclaimed record, but super cool guy. And strangely, he also died from complications due to an appendectomy in the 1920s as a fairly young man. But he ended up leaving Biltmore in 1920 after being there for 11 years and started his own Packard dealer that started with a really simple name. It was just called the Motor Company. And then later he opened his own dealer called Plemons Motor Company and was selling Packard.
Steve, I'll let you catch Vince's question.
Sorry, Todd, I don't know what you're referring to.
Oh, Vince was asking a question over here. I was just going to let you catch it since I'm...
Okay, yep. So Vince was asking about the Chalmers. Is that the same as the Allison Chalmers tractor?
No, it's a different brand. Yeah, no, it's similar name, but it's a different company. So Chalmers, this is Chalmers Detroit, And they owned a couple different companies. They had a line of economy cars called Saxon as well. That was another early brand that Eugene sold, but it did not have any relation to Alice Chalmers. That's a great question, but yeah, totally different.
All right, I'll let this play to the next.
Yeah, we can just kind of zip through. We'll show a couple of the cars. These are just kind of examples, so you can kind of picture what George driving through the estate. This would be like a 1910.
More of my great editing right here in between customers at the restaurant.
All title text. That's a brand I haven't heard of.
That's right, the 1909 title text with brass trim. So this would be like a 1910 Chalmers. And then we can go on to the next one. Would be
the one with no title.
Yeah. So this is kind of an example of the 1912, the 1911 Stevens-duryea. So this is, it'd be a big touring car, and this would be like what they would call a T-head 6. Yeah, and then this is a 1912 Stevens-duryea.
It's just like today, where every vehicle on the road looks exactly the same.
I know a lot of it does look pretty similar.
Why is there so little variety then and now? It's unbelievable.
I don't know. It's not yet, not until later.
I give up on my editing. maybe. Yeah, thanks, Randall. Randall's on fire. Randall, I've had a rough week. That's why I actually have Jennifer here. Let Jennifer jump on just a second. Can you unmute yours?
Yeah, I sure can.
All right. Randall said I'm fired, so you're taking over for sure.
Absolutely. Here, just go ahead and log off, Todd. We'll see you later.
And then we can go to the next one if you want.
If this one doesn't have a title, we're just skipping to the end of the show. Yeah, this is Edith's right here.
So this would be the last car that George would have purchased before his death. So this is the 1913 Stevens-duryea, and this is the actual car that Edith owned. So this is still in the collection of Biltmore today, and unfortunately, it's not on display. It's in a private storehouse that Biltmore has. I don't know exactly where that's located, but I bug them about it all the time. So hopefully they'll get it out. I've never seen it in person. I've just heard from some former employees and I think, I do maybe remember seeing it at the winery one time, but it's a beautiful car. Now it is right-hand drive, so that's kind of before they standardized having the wheel on one side or the other. Now, one thing that's cool about this car is it does have her initials in gold leaf on the driver's side door. So a really special car. And Edith,
does it have her Instagram handle on there too? Or?
It probably, yeah. It's got that. Mm-hmm. But it's super.
Those look like electric headlights. 1913. That's pretty advanced.
So this is pretty cool. It's a combination of electric and acetylene headlights. So kind of like if you've been in some of the old Gilded Age mansions where they had what was called a gasolier, where they had electric and natural gas. Same concept here.
Yep, fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
So did she drive a lot on her own, or did she rely on a chauffeur? Or?
No, she drove a lot on her own, and this is really kind of the pivot point in history that we see a lot more women becoming independent because of the automobile. I mean, they don't have to wait around on a chauffeur or their husband anymore. They're ready to hop in and just go. And so that's what
she complains that she does drive 150, 170 miles every day. So when we go somewhere in the afternoon, she walks automatically to the passenger side.
I love it, Princess. I bet she did too, but maybe she didn't have that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd love to find out some more. There's a good photocopy of her driver's license that you can see in some of the Biltmore. They have a great article on their website about some of the automobile stuff. This kind of a light touch, which is kind of neat.
Yeah, Jennifer, like I said, me and you have talked many times. Jennifer, every time I think we've visited the Biltmore, we've often said, that there needs to be some cars on display, even if just a static display, even if they're not actually their cars or whatever. I feel like that's something that's missing out from the tour there.
Yeah, it helps.
Yeah, I
It
mean,
helps set the era, right? Like the cars
Yeah.
really have it's like the
it gives you,
furniture. You need the right era of vehicle around to show off a building like that.
Yeah.
well, yeah, there's really not even many horse-drawn carriages or anything. I mean, there's kind of like no vehicles, like even bicycles, and they used motorcycles a lot on the estate.
Yeah.
And at one point, there's the Legacy Museum in Antler Hill Village, which is another portion of the estate that had a Harley Davidson, because they did use motorcycles a lot to get around. The staff did to get around the estate, and that is, I don't think, on display any longer since I've been there. But yeah, there's a lot of opportunity.
All right, let's see what's next.
I think we were going to talk about, I did want to talk about some of the other brands that Eugene was selling. So this is one of the other types of vehicles that he would have sold. So as I mentioned, he was not only selling bicycles and then these beautiful cars, but this is what would basically, this is a Rio truck. So this would be a Rio Speedwagon that would have been used on the farm. And they actually had a Chalmers truck that was traded in for the Rio. So this would be, theirs was kind of more of a depot hack conversion that would be used to pick up people from the railway station in Biltmore Village. But they also had some farm trucks for hauling produce and, generally moving things around the estate.
Another title text vehicle. Like I said, I don't need to do this stuff in between customers at work.
Now this is, I wanted to show, this is a pretty neat Packard coupe. So this, George and Edith had one daughter who was named Cornelia, and she primarily grew up on the estate, and she later married a man named John Cecil. And this is a photograph from their wedding day of John's 1924 Packard coupe, which is still owned by the Cecil family. And this would be, now Cornelia had two sons, George and William. And so this is owned by George's family. So there was kind of a split there where William Cecil took all of the Biltmore estate, and George took a lot of the commercial property and the dairy business that was associated with Biltmore. And if you want to learn a little bit more about that, it's detailed in a book called Lady on the Hill by Howard Covington that's focused around the business side of how all this unraveled after George died, and it traveled through several different, it's still mostly, it's still all family owned as far as shareholders in the company. But this car does still exist. It is in a private storage facility in Asheville as well. But that's a mystery I'm kind of running down is, did Eugene Sawyer sell this car, or did Raymond Plemons sell it? Because they were both selling Packard at the time. And I love cars that have like this deep Asheville historical connection. So pretty cool.
All right, hey, you want to tell who some of the other descendants are from Cornelius? And again, sorry, I don't have a voice.
Oh, that's okay. Well, there's kind of a lot. So he had
some of the more famous ones that some of the guests might recognize.
Well, probably one of the most famous would be Anderson Cooper, is one of the last living descendants of the Vanderbilt family. Willie Kay was very famous. Consuelo, who is Alva Vanderbilt's daughter, is very famous, and is one of the characters on the Gilded Age, is loosely based on her. There's kind of a lot that, I mean, it's really about the Vanderbilts. That's kind of thinly veiled, but I'm trying to think. I mean, there's William Vanderbilt. They talk, if you watch like The Men Who Build America, will give you a really good
and Anderson's mother,
right? Yeah, Glory Vanderbilt is pretty famous. So there's so many. It's kind of like hard to pick all of them.
She had the blue jeans back in, what was it, the 70s or 80s?
Yeah, she had she had a whole fashion line.
She had like an eyeglass collection at Sears, I think. Yeah, the Gloria Vanderbilt collection. that they kind of make a joke about. There's a Seinfeld episode where George accidentally buys women eyeglass frames from the Gloria Vanderbilt collection, which is kind of funny.
Hey, and something else, we're talking about the amount of money they had, the wealth that they had, and it wasn't very long that all that wealth was totally gone.
That's correct. Yeah, George, he ran out of money pretty quickly in the construction of the estate and ended up taking out several different personal loans that amounted to about $250,000. And Edith did not know about this and became aware after he died. And she was a very astute business person and ended up selling off some pieces of the estate, most notably about 86,000 acres of land she sold to the U.S. government to form Pisgah National Forest at $5 an acre. And then she sold Biltmore Village to a guy named George Stevens in 1916 after the flood destroyed a lot of that area and developed a neighborhood called Biltmore Forest that is its own incorporated town, as all trying to bring income and making the estate self-sustaining. But I found a mention in the paper where George's now this is before he had automobiles. His carriage drivers went on strike because he would not raise their wages in 1901. And on Sunday, he was out there waiting for his carriage to take him to his church in Biltmore Village, All Souls Episcopal Church, and no carriage comes. They said, "We're not taking you to church today. Too bad, until we get a raise." So there was some cracks starting to form already. I mean, when you own your own English village, you've got 125,000 acres, a large estate, multiple residences around the country and the world, and you have no money coming in. That tends to add up.
Steve, Vince is asking you if you've ever seen one of the
No, the Canadian Chalmers I have not, but I'll check with my brother-in-law Harry, who's the auto historian, and we'll see what we can find.
All right, let's go east to the next one that probably has no title.
So this is actually a newer photo, although it looks old. So these are a couple of vehicles that are actually in the Estes Wynn Antique Car Museum here in Asheville that we talked about on our last live cast. And these belong to a guy named Bob Allen, who was a good friend of the museum founder. So he worked at a dealership here in Asheville called Harry's Cadillac and Pontiac, and was really a very successful salesman under the owner Harry Blomberg. And the car in the front, let's go back just one picture. So the car in the front is a 1917 Overland, and then it is behind that is a 1913 Model T, and then I think it's a 1913 center door Model T, and all three of those cars belong to Bob, and he was very involved in the AACA and helped put on a concours show at Biltmore in 1965. But his family were caretakers for Biltmore, and he actually restored both the Overland and that Model T in what is now the winery. So that was the dairy barn for the estate, and they have a beautiful lacquer paint job on them that he did in this barn on the estate. So we have a little bit of a Biltmore connection there, which is kind of fun. But that's just a picture that I came across in doing some research for the museum. So that's a picture of Bob Allen with the 1927 LaSalle touring car that is in the collection at the Estes Wynn as well. So he was really responsible for doing a lot of restoration and finding parts for those cars, especially for Harry. So really neat guy.
And if I did this correctly, that black and white picture, yeah, will be there too.
Yeah, so this is the 1913 T from that picture. It is in the lobby of the Grove Park Inn Hotel here in Asheville, Historic Inn. And they borrowed it from us 12 years ago, almost 13 years ago now, for the 100th anniversary of the Grove Park Inn, which opened in 1913. So it is part of our collection, but is on display there in the lobby. And they have a great glass globe, gas pump, and some old street signs as well, which is cool. But that was kind of a good connection in that, I wanted to bring up 1913 is really when the automobile was taken off in Asheville. And so all these tourists, I mean, it enabled this automobile tourism, which was much cheaper and more convenient for a lot of people. And so we started having a lot of people come in. Now, this is the 1917 Overland that is in the museum as at the Estes Wind. So if you come in there and see it, that's a pretty unique. You don't see a lot of Overlands.
Now these were cars that were at the concourse event at Biltmore. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, and Bob's nephew and son told me that this car used to be in the Hendersonville Apple Parade a lot, as Apple Festival Parade as well. So it still has like a 1968 North Carolina inspection sticker in the windshield, which is pretty cool. But yeah, we've got some really neat. There's a Rio behind it, 1923 Rio T6 touring car, as well as a 1928 Pontiac. So the collection, we've got a lot of pre-war cars, which is pretty neat for people that you wouldn't get to see that anywhere else in Asheville.
Vince is asking, is that still the way it is, Heath, for the Biltmore? And I can answer part of that because you cannot drive up there anymore like that on your own.
That's right. Yeah.
The first time I visited, you could still park, on the sides, the driveway where the buses and stuff park at now. That's where you parked at before they built the extra parking lots, the overflow.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you can't. They have these retractable, what they call bollards, which are like a big brass pylon that prevents you from driving up there. So the only thing that can really get up there is tour buses. And I recently inquired, I'm hosting the Chrysler 300 Club meet in Asheville this spring. And I said, hey, we'd love to do a club photo at the front. And they said, well, okay, you'll need to be here by 7:00 a.m. before everything opens, and it's $1,000. So we decided maybe that was not going to work. But
yeah, that's why Jen and I didn't get married there.
Photoshop. That's the answer.
You could use AI maybe. No, I think I've been told that if you want to be married there, it's going to be a minimum of $500,000 if you're out on the front lawn. So, which I would believe.
Jen, you want to have our anniversary party there?
Yeah, vow renewals there.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
But that probably brings us to a good. We were talking about when did they first start allowing people in to drive vehicles into Biltmore. So that started in 1909. But even before that, he was letting people come in with horse and buggy that wanted to ride on these beautiful roads. So in 1903, they started a formalized pass system that did include an admission cost. Now, you could drive through the estate, but you couldn't go in the house unless maybe you caught, a housekeeper or somebody when the Vanderbilts were out of town. And they had some rules. So I was able to find on the Biltmore's website, on the back of the ticket, they said no plucking of flowers or breaking of trees or shrubs, no driving over planted areas or the borders of roads, and the taking of photographs anywhere on the estate is prohibited. So that's as early as 1903. And then the admission rates were 25 cents for a vehicle drawn by one horse, carrying 1 to 2 people, or for a person on horseback. 50 cents for a 2-horse vehicle carrying not over 5 persons. Each additional person was 10 cents. And then any additional horses were 25 cents. And then it was 10 cents for a single person on foot or with a bicycle. So it's a little different now. I think it's at least about a minimum of $150 to get in today.
Yeah.
So the automobiles were not allowed on the estate till 1909. And in 1921, they changed the pricing structure a little bit. So it was based on the size of the car. So a 5-passenger car, that would be 4 passengers and the driver, was $1 in 1921. So it'd be about $17 adjusted for inflation today. A 7-passenger car would be $1.50. Now, this became pretty big business for them. So in 1919, they recorded that they had 12,200 cars coming through there for the entire year. And it stayed between 12 to 13,000, roughly average from 1919 to 1926. And again, this was just driving through the estate. They didn't open the house until 1930 for visitors, and that's when they started. It was $4 a ticket, which is a lot of money in 1930. And you got to think this is right at the beginning of the Great Depression. Now, this is interesting also when you think about, I pulled together a couple stats on the amount of vehicles that were registered in Asheville. So in 1919, there were 2,627 vehicles registered in Buncombe County. By 1926, there were 16,620 vehicles. So that would be about a 530% increase. Now, our population was about 25,000. So that's a lot of people with cars at that time now. And it would grow to, the population would grow to 50,000 by the end of the decade. So the 1920s we think of as like really this pivotal decade that changed. I mean, it's really what created Asheville that it is today. But you just don't think about that many people driving. But it was a big problem, not only the roads, but we had all this congestion. So we had to do a lot of improvement at that time. We built the Bowcatcher Tunnel to alleviate traffic and allow cars to get from downtown to East Asheville. And we built these modern paved roads, and that was really due to George Vanderbilt and the Buncombe County Good Roads Committee. They were able to get a bill in 1913 for $700,000 to level and grade the road, and that's in 1913 dollars. I'm not exactly sure what that'd be with inflation, but he was a big part of that. He could see the future that he was like, hey, as this automobile tourism is picking up, we need to have good roads. So probably compared to a lot of other cities our size, we had a lot better roads and probably more use of the automobile that people realize, especially with probably a more wealthy population, as we had all these wealthy people from the north and deep south coming in. A lot of people from South Carolina coming up here to vacation. So it was a big change.
Vince was asking, he said, interesting that the public was allowed in at all. Makes me wonder why. Was it just a financial thing, or he just wanted to share it and make some money? Or
he wanted to share it. I mean, that's kind of his initial idea when he started developing the grounds of Frederick Law Olmsted, was he wanted there to be a public park, and they had some pretty grand aspirations for the land. Like, really, the story of the land is kind of bigger than the house. So when George Vanderbilt and Frederick Law Olmsted were planning it, the land was in very poor condition. It had been heavily logged. Timber logging was a really big industry in the 1800s in this area, Western North Carolina. And there had also been a lot of farmers on the land that didn't really rotate the soil and pretty heavily mess it up. So when Olmsted first came, he was kind of a little bit, he's like, man, this is going to be a big project. And they had an idea to create a sustainable timber operation. So they did regrow a lot of trees. Biltmore is home to the first school of forestry in the country that he started with a forester named Gifford Pinchot, and later was succeeded by a gentleman named Dr. Carl Schenck. And they built up one of the best forestry programs in the country, formalized schooling. But Olmsted also had the idea for what was called an arboretum, that would be an outdoor museum of trees and live species. And they also built a Biltmore nursery, because when they started rehabilitating this land, there was no nursery in the country that could provide enough trees, flowers, shrubs to fill 125,000 acres. So they built their own nursery and grew all the plants and trees, but they also collected, Chauncey Beadle that we were talking about, collected a lot of these flowers from the mountains and cataloged them. And they became this repository for nature and plant life that people would write to all over the country. And then they produced a seed catalog and plant catalog that was very profitable. But all of their greenhouses were in a low-lying floodplain that was wiped out in the flood of 1916. And then after that, Edith said, hey, this isn't, it's not really reasonable to bring it back. We're closing it down. So George's idea was and Olmsted was to really make this he was pretty ahead of his time in environmentalism for sure, but to make this like a public place that would serve as kind of this center of knowledge for plant life and things like that. So I think it was that. I mean, I don't know that the money amounted to a whole lot, but when they did open for visitors in 1930, they were pretty strapped for money. So there was more of a profit motive at that time, but it was a combination with the Chamber of Commerce to bring more people here, since the economic conditions were pretty bad and they had good visitorship. Even though you're talking about gas money and a $4 admission ticket, to get in would not be inconsequential for a lot of families. But I think, I mean, anybody you have a 4-mile driveway to the house, and when you get up there, it's this dramatic reveal. So I think in an age before social media and constant posting, you would just be blown away. I mean, even that aside, like even in the modern times, you get up there and you're like, oh my goodness, it just takes your breath away. So,
and Olmsted was the landscape architect. Basically, he was in charge of the grounds, right?
So yeah, he designed all of the grounds as well as did the design for Biltmore Village, which was George's English country village that had his church, All Souls Cathedral, but it also had rental homes. So a lot of people think this was housing for the workers that was provided at no cost. It actually was another income stream. So these were rental properties that were in Biltmore Village. But Olmsted was a designer that he's known for designing Central Park. It's probably one of his most famous commissions, but he did things all over the country. Prior to that, he traveled as a journalist and wrote a book called A Journey Through the Backcountry in 1850, where he chronicled the conditions of slavery in the South, which is a pretty interesting read. He was a very passionate abolitionist at that time. So he lived a lot of different lives. He's a really interesting person. There's a couple really good books on Olmsted. But if you want to get the full Biltmore story, there's probably like 20 books I could recommend on all these different. I mean, it takes a lot to put all the pieces together.
Jen, did you have any questions about? I know it's all subject from automobile stuff or whatever, but I know you really enjoy the flowers and.
Oh yeah, that's one of my favorite parts, and I love that the Biltmores thought so much about him that they have that full-size commissioned portrait of him in the home.
The Vanderbilts.
Yeah, sorry, the Vanderbilts. That's what I meant. I love that they have that in Biltmore. I think that's amazing that they've honored.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a beautiful John Singer Sargent painting of Olmsted, and this was really his last big work. I mean, he was in the twilight of his career, and in his mid to late 70s, was not in good health, and yet had a very vigorous, ambitious plan for all this.
Heath, can you tell us a little bit about this article here talking about the telegram from Edith?
So this is a little clipping of an article that I found. So the chauffeur and mechanic we were talking about, Raymond Plemons, organized a tour for local school teachers that was going to drive them through the Biltmore estate. This would have been in 1920. And he was organizing this caravan of 50 cars that was going to take all these local school teachers from around Western North Carolina on a tour of the estate for a teachers conference that was here in Asheville. And I just thought that was kind of a neat, that was, you find a lot of little nuggets along the way. And I thought, man, what an event to see all those old touring cars and all these people dressed up in this big caravan going through the estate. But yeah, there was all kind of things like that Asheville had a lot of automotive culture going on at the turn of the century.
Cool deal. So, like I said, I still don't have much of a voice. Steve, do you have any questions about automobiles or anything?
Oh, it's just so fascinating. Like you say, there were so many different brands just in the United States alone, plus coming over from Europe. It's mind-boggling, and I imagine it was pretty wise for Mr. Vanderbilt there to make sure he was buying very local from a shop that could do his maintenance for him and that sort of thing. Because otherwise he would have been stuck waiting for parts for months.
Right. Well, and I came across some kind of interesting, so some of the other brands that Eugene Sawyer was selling at the time, a couple I had not heard of. So in this era of 1901 to 1919, there was a company called Chase that made trucks, Buick, Cadillac, Knox, Rio, Chalmers. There was a company I had never heard of that was called RCH Corporation, and this was Robert C. Hupp, and it was after Robert Hupp left Huppmobile and started his own company. Yeah. So kind of similar to Ransom Eli Olds, who left Oldsmobile to start Rio. He had Stevens-Duryea, Saxon, Dodge, and Hudson. Eugene was very big Dodge dealer and Hudson dealer from that point on, and then he added Studebaker in the late 20s and 30s and had Packard as well. So he was really known for Studebaker and Packard in his later years. But it was really neat looking back through his sales ledger at all these different. I mean, this is like 11 different makes and models. I mean, or companies that he was selling. And now Eugene Sawyer lived to be 95 years old. And I don't think he retired from the automobile business until after World War II. And it was so difficult to get vehicles and parts. And there was kind of some underhanded, like backroom deals going on with some of these car companies after, switching from wartime production to consumer goods again, that he was like, I'm over it. This is just, he was a very ethical person. He's like, I'm not interested in, doing stuff like that. So really, really interesting guy.
I wonder how many collectors have a car in their collection now and don't even know it's previously or originally owned by Vanderbilt.
I wonder about that. And, Asheville also had a Rolls-Royce dealer from the mid-20s, 1925 to 28. Wow. And I've kind of wondered how many of those, somebody has at a Concours and they don't know it was sold in downtown Asheville, which is really cool. And I found there was a lady that bought a Rolls-Royce. Now, this is when they had their factory in Massachusetts. And there's a pretty good register of those cars. And she bought a Rolls-Royce here that was her car. And it turned out it was a demonstrator model they kind of fixed up to look good, but it had like terrible mechanical problems. And she sued Rolls-Royce, and it was like this big thing in the newspaper. But that kind of gives you an idea of how insane the wealth got in Asheville, that we had all these real estate developers in this boom time of the 1920s that people were rolling around in Rolls-Royces. Mm-hmm. You think of this as being a pretty isolated mountain town, but it's always been very, very cosmopolitan, and we've had some pretty influential outsiders and locals that left their mark on the city. So
I told Jen a few weeks ago how blessed you were that you would never run out of content for your social media stuff because of the amount of automotive history there. If you concentrated just on automotive history, not even the architecture or anything like that you have so much there at your disposal, and your wealth of knowledge too.
Man, thank you. Well, it's there. I keep finding new stuff every day. This is kind of a funny aside, but architecture mystery. So I had a guy write to me, and one of the big buildings that we have in where I went to high school is Asheville High School. It was built in 1928 and designed by architect Douglas Ellington. And it's made out of this beautiful pink granite. It's called Balfour granite from Rowan County, kind of further down the state from Asheville. And there's a couple houses in some of the historic neighborhoods that are made out of the same stone. And there's all these like urban legends like, they took the leftover rocks from Asheville High School and took it over here. And I was trying to figure out the architect on these houses. I'm like, man, was it Douglas Ellington? Because he did so many neat. He was really more prevalent in residential later in his life. But I'm like, man, it's driving me crazy. I wrote down the address of the three houses. They're identical in design, and two of them are in the same neighborhood. One's in an adjoining. And, I do a lot of research on newspapers.com, looking at these old microfilm that have been scanned in. And you're always trying to find the correct word that's going to kind of unlock the history you're looking for, whatever the key word is. And it's kind of like playing password or something. And I don't remember exactly what I searched, but like I think I just like searched pink granite or something and dialed in like a very narrow time frame. And I came across a newspaper ad that identified all the houses and the architects, and it turned out to be the same stone. Now, it was not leftover material, it just happened to be the same quarry, but just as an example of stuff I'm into is all over anything Asheville, and I love when people give me a mystery. I love trying to figure it out. But
so we've tracked down one of the Vanderbilt estate automobiles right here.
It looks like Bruce Kleppinger from Ohio. His family bought a 1948 Jeepster from a Vanderbilt estate sale. So there you go. Really? You're already doing a service connecting these old cars to the history.
Wow, that's awesome.
That's just my camera doing its thing.
He says his cousin still has it.
Oh, wow. Is it a Jeepster? I wonder if it's a Jeepster truck. Because I have a friend that he works in telecom, and he was telling me that he did some work at one of the Vanderbilt, or probably would have been Cecil family, and they had it was like a Jeepster pickup with the Biltmore logo on the doors. And I think even a VW Beetle. But that's kind of urban legend. I try try to. I love some of the stories. That's super cool though that he has the truck. I wonder. I've
Yeah,
been told that.
what its history. I mean, by that time there were so many Vanderbilts that
Right.
the chances that it came from Biltmore, but you never know.
You never know.
Was it the Cecils at Biltmore then, or was it still the Vanderbilt family in 48? That would have been the Cecils by then, right?
It would have been the Cecils, yeah, at that point. And there's still, unfortunately, since the storm, this closed down. But I'm also a big Land Rover guy. I love the history of Land Rover. It was very popular here in Western North Carolina with the mountains. And in 2004, Land Rover opened a driving school at Biltmore, so you could drive through all these incredible trails way back in the estate. And in the pandemic, it opened up late in November, and during the pandemic, I bought a 2003 Land Rover Discovery, and it was pretty beat up, but I fixed it up and took it to the driving school. They had a thing called the Owner's Day, and you could drive. And I was blown away because we went way back in the estate where you normally can't go. Like they opened it up for the driving school, and you'd spend about 4 hours on the trail and then come back and have a nice lunch. And it was like, a really fun thing, but there was so much tree damage during the storm that has not opened up yet. But that was one of only like several locations in the country that had a Land Rover driving school. So it was a really neat thing. So you could either go to an owner's day and bring your own Land Rover, or you could use one of theirs. They would always have the latest model Range Rover or Discovery LR3, LR4. But it was funny. I think I had the cheapest Land Rover on the course that day. Mine was like $3,500, and everybody's in the new, $90,000 Defender, which I like being the underdog, kind of like that. It was kind of fun. But I was amazed how good. I mean, this was a stock Discovery, and I was amazed at everywhere it went. I mean, just on regular, it wasn't, modified or just on kind of pretty regular all-terrains. And we saw so much, and the truck just did everything you needed. I mean, it never spun a tire, just like a mountain goat crawled over everything. So
that would be cool to see part of the estate that the general public doesn't get to see.
Yeah, I mean, we went, not only, there's some really neat trails behind the inn on Biltmore, which is their 5-star luxury hotel, but then we also went way out on the west side where there's a bridge that crosses the French Broad that's gated off normally, and we went all way back in there, and then they close it out they have you drive through this big muddy water crossing that we went through, and my brother-in-law was with me, and he's like, I bet you wish you had the mud tires. I'm like, this is a Land Rover, it'd go through anything. So we just cruise right through. But
Bruce said it's a Jeepster. Jeepster is a convertible Phaeton green with maroon interior.
Oh, wow. Okay. See, the one I've heard about was a pickup truck, like a farm truck. That's so cool.
Maybe Bruce can get Steve some more information sometime, and I can forward it to you.
Sure.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. Well, and I don't know that there's, other than the stevens-duryea, I have been told, I don't know that there are any other vehicles in the collection other than, I've been told there's an old fire truck from the 40s. Biltmore had their own fire truck until they later contracted with the town of Biltmore Forest to provide fire service, and now the city of Asheville.
And maybe real quick, before we get off of here, Bruce, if you know what year, do you know what year the family got the Jeepster from the estate? Maybe we can answer that before we get off here too. Heath, real quick also, before we get off of here.
I was going to say, can I put in a plug?
Yeah. I know, put your plug in for your car show coming up, which, Jennifer, you want to touch on your feelings about going to this?
We are so excited. Yes, we are planning on joining you on this.
I'm so happy.
We've been talking about last time we talked to you. So, yeah, we're planning on coming to it.
All right. That's awesome. Well, so I mentioned earlier that I'm hosting the Chrysler 300 meet in Asheville. So this is dedicated to Chrysler 300s, what we call letter cars, Chrysler 300B, C, D, E, F, G. It's 1955 to 65. And so we're having our meet. We'll go to Biltmore and some other tourist attractions. But one thing the club does is on the last day of the meet, we always host a community car show. And we're going to be hosting, we're calling it the Motor Mile Car Show. And this is on a street in downtown Asheville called Cox Avenue. It's Coxe. And it is named for Colonel Frank Cox, who was the developer of the Battery Park Hotel, which was the first luxury hotel in Asheville. And it was atop this large hill that was demolished and excavated, and all the dirt filled in this ravine to create Cox Avenue, which was the first city's motor mile. So there's a bunch of old dealerships dating back to the 1920s. So the avenue was created in 1924. So we're having the car show actually on Cox Avenue with all these old buildings as our backdrop. So we're blocking off the streets. And if you're local to Asheville or kind of know geography, we'll have one city block from Hilliard Avenue all the way down to Buxton. And so the cars would be parked at an angle. It's free to enter your car. It is also free to come participate. It's open to all makes and models. We wanted to do something that was accessible and affordable to the community, and just a good, feel good, family friendly event. And also, but do it in the context of this incredible automobile history in Asheville. That's something I'm like always trying to tell people about, because now the area is primarily known kind of as the brewery district. So they kind of rebranded that neighborhood. We always called it Cox Avenue, the motor mile growing up. And it's kind of been rebranded about 10 years ago as the South Slope. And that's where a lot of the microbreweries and restaurants are now. So a lot of the car dealers have been, old car dealer buildings have been turned into mixed use, like residential and commercial condominiums and retail space or office space. But the Sawyer Motor Building that we showed the picture of is kind of the crown jewel of this area, and just has so much great history about Eugene Sawyer. I just want more people to know about it and to be proud of the history that we have, because I think it's really unique in a lot of the places I've visited. So this is going to be Saturday, May 30th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And if you want to register your car, if you just visit my website, mountaineermotortours.com/car show, and we just have a little link to register your car. There's no cost. It's just to get an idea for attendance planning. So we can kind of estimate. We probably have room for maybe 120 cars down there, 120, 130. It's a really wide avenue. And with the cars being kind of angled in, we'll have plenty of space. But there's a lot of good places to eat down there. You're also close to shopping in downtown Asheville. This is also the weekend after Memorial Day. So Memorial Day is early. It's the weekend of the 23rd. So don't worry. It won't mess up your plans for Mother's Day or Memorial Day. It's going to be the last weekend. Should be nice weather as well. Not too hot.
Steve, Bruce said sent you a picture.
Yeah, I'll get that to you.
Available.
Yep.
And that'll be good. And Jen, I'll let you close us out. And again, because I'm gonna lose my voice before I finish it. So thank y'all, Jen.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Heath, we always enjoy having you on. You just know everything about everything, and I'm always so impressed. I learn something every time you, and also just enjoy talking to you so much. Steven, we love having you on every time. Thank you for co-hosting.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I just listen and am fascinated.
and thank you for helping me navigate this part of this venture on the YouTube channel too. So
yeah, it's great.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's always fun. I love talking about this stuff with y'all. It's a blast.
It's a pleasure.
Well, thank you for all the hard work you did on everything too. You've done a phenomenal job again, and we look forward to you on May 30th also.
Awesome. Yeah, I can't wait to see you guys. It's going to be, I was excited that y'all are bringing the T, because we have a couple Model A's registered, so that'll be really fun to have some of the early Fords.
Yeah. Todd, which one are we bringing?
I told him worst case scenario is we'll bring the Buick. He'll hear us when we get across the state line. He'll start hearing us, but I don't know which. Probably the touring car. I don't know yet. But,
okay, yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, thanks for everyone watching, and appreciate you guys. And Heath, I'll set this up where we can share it on your channel too.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, thanks again,
Thanks,
Steve.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, take care.
All right,
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.